The first thing Victoria Hayes noticed that morning wasn't the cold cutting through her BMW's heated interior, or the way pre-dawn Chicago looked like a photograph waiting to happen, all glass and steel catching the first weak light. What she noticed was the silence between gear shifts, that half-second of perfection, where everything in her carefully constructed world existed exactly where it needed to be. 28 minutes to Harborline Motors headquarters. 17 miles of clear highway, a presentation deck that had cost her 3 months of 18-hour days loaded and perfect on the passenger seat beside a turkey sandwich she'd made at 5:30 because sleeping past dawn felt like admitting defeat. The coffee in her cup holder was still hot. Her father's voice echoed from somewhere in the past. Preparation is the only luck that matters, and Tori had prepared for everything. The engine coughed, not a mechanical sound. Something organic went wrong in a way that sent ice through her veins before her conscious mind caught up. Her hands tightened on the wheel. She'd heard that sound exactly once before in her father's old Buick outside Toledo when she was 16, right before it left them stranded in the rain for 6 hours while he tried to fix it with a Swiss Army knife and pure stubbornness. No. The word came out sharp, a command the universe had no intention of obeying. Not today. The BMW coughed again. This time the whole car shuddered like something vital had just quit, and the dashboard erupted in a Christmas display of warning lights, yellow-red symbols she'd never seen in 3 years of immaculate maintenance. The engine stuttered, caught, stuttered again, died. Power steering went first. The wheel turned to lead in her hands as she wrestled the vehicle toward the shoulder, adrenaline spiking hard enough to taste copper. No acceleration, no response from the pedal, just momentum and gravity, and the sick certainty that everything she'd built was about to collapse because of a machine that had chosen this exact moment to betray her. Gravel crunched under the tires as she coasted to a stop on the shoulder of I-90 semis, blowing past at 70 miles an hour, their wake rocking the BMW like a toy. For 5 full seconds, Tori just sat there, gripping the wheel hard enough to leave marks staring at the dashboard like she could restart it through sheer force of will. Didn't work. She turned the key. Nothing. Turned it again. The engine didn't even try, just a clicking sound, pathetic and final. 26 minutes. The Harborline boardroom was still 17 miles away, tucked into the gleaming tech corridor in Schaumburg. Even if she called a rideshare right now, even if one materialized instantly out of the frozen November morning, she'd be cutting it too close. The board didn't wait. They especially didn't wait for junior executives who'd been given exactly 1 shot to prove they belonged at the table. Tori pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and allowed herself exactly 10 seconds of pure, undiluted panic. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her throat tightened with the kind of fear that came from knowing you'd done everything right and it still wasn't going to be enough. Then the 10 seconds were up. She lifted her head. She was Victoria Hayes. She'd clawed her way from a state school scholarship to a corner office at 29. She didn't fall apart when things went wrong. She found solutions. Phone out, roadside assistance app, estimated wait time 45 to 60 minutes. Useless. She tried her assistant straight to voicemail. Natalie didn't start until 8:30. Scrolled through her contacts looking for anyone close enough to help anyone who owed her a favor big enough to drop everything and drive to the middle of nowhere. Nothing. Everyone she knew was either already at work, too far away, or not the kind of person you called in an emergency. That was the price of climbing fast. You didn't build a safety net. You built a ladder. The blue pickup truck appeared in her rearview mirror like an answer to a prayer she didn't know how to say. Old truck. 15 years maybe older, with faded paint and a dent in the driver's side door that looked like it had a story. It slowed as it approached, then pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet behind her, gravel crunching under worn tires. Tori's first instinct was caution. Woman alone on a highway at 7:30 in the morning, she'd seen enough news stories to know that not every good Samaritan had good intentions. But desperation recalculates risk, and right now she didn't have the luxury of being picky. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered in a way that came from work rather than a gym. Mid-30s dark hair that needed a trim. Flannel shirt layered over thermal jeans that had seen better days, work boots with the kind of wear that spoke of years, not months. But it was his hands Tori noticed first, stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing would ever fully remove. The kind of permanent marking that came from a life spent working with engines and metal and things that didn't forgive mistakes. He walked toward her car, slowly. Hands visible movements, deliberate and non-threatening. When he got close enough, he tapped gently on the window. Tori hesitated for half a second, that primitive calculation of threat versus need, then lowered it. "Morning." His voice was quiet, steady, the kind of voice that didn't waste words. "Saw you pulled over. You okay?" "Car died." She tried to keep the edge of panic out of her tone and failed. "Just died. I have somewhere I need to be in 26 minutes, and I don't." She stopped herself. He didn't need her life story. The stranger glanced at the BMW, then back at her. Something in his expression shifted recognition maybe, or professional assessment. "Mind if I take a look?" "Do you know cars?" The question came out sharper than she intended. He didn't seem offended, just smiled slightly, something flickering in his eyes that might have been amusement. "Yeah, I know cars." 24 minutes. No other options presenting themselves out of thin air. Tori pulled the release lever and the hood gave a soft click. He lifted it with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, propping it open with the support rod. Then he leaned in, one hand braced on the frame, and just looked. Not poking randomly, not making a show of expertise, just methodical examination with focused intelligence. Tori watched through the windshield, fingers drumming anxiously on the wheel. He wasn't rushing, wasn't performing, just reading the engine bay like a musician reading sheet music. His eyes moving with the kind of pattern recognition that suggested this was more than a hobby. After maybe 60 seconds, he straightened and walked back to her window. "When's the last time you had the battery terminals cleaned?" She blinked. "I don't know. The dealership handles all the maintenance." He nodded like that told him everything he needed to know about her relationship with machines, the kind of person who paid other people to understand the things that kept her moving. "Your battery's fine, but the connection's corroded, not getting clean flow to the starter." He gestured toward his truck. "I've got tools, can clean it off." "How long will that take?" 10 minutes, maybe less. 22 minutes until the meeting. If he could really fix it in 10, she could still make it. She'd be sweating, her hair would be a disaster, but she'd be there. "Please." The word came out more desperate than she intended. "I'll pay you whatever you want." He shook his head. "Don't worry about it." He walked back to his truck and returned with a toolbox that looked older than the vehicle itself. Tori watched as he pulled out a wire brush, a wrench, some kind of cleaning solution in a small bottle. Then he went to work. She'd never paid much attention to how cars actually functioned. They were tools, appliances, things that either worked or didn't. But watching this stranger move through her engine bay with quiet confidence, she found herself oddly mesmerized. Every movement was deliberate. No wasted motion. He loosened the terminal clamps with practiced efficiency, brushed away the white-green corrosion with careful strokes, wiped everything down with a rag that was already beyond saving. "Try it now." Tori turned the key. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught. The dashboard light stabilized. Relief hit her so hard she actually felt dizzy. Then the engine stuttered. The RPMs dropped sharply. The whole car coughed like a drowning man coming up for air and finding water instead. "No, come on." It died again. The stranger was already back under the hood before she could say anything. His expression different now, more focused. A small crease between his eyebrows that suggested he'd just encountered something that didn't fit the expected pattern. 19 minutes. She could feel the opportunity slipping away second by second. Even if he got it running right now, she'd hit traffic. She'd arrive flustered, unprepared, off her game. The board would see it in her face before she said a word, but there was nothing else to do but wait. He was muttering to himself, too quiet for her to hear, but she could see his lips moving, running through possibilities, diagnosing in real time. He pulled out his phone and used the flashlight to peer into a space she couldn't see, checking connections deeper in the system. 15 minutes. How's it looking? She tried to keep her voice steady. Fuel pump relays toast. He didn't look up. That's why it keeps dying. Battery issue was just the first symptom. Can you fix it? Long pause. Long enough that Tori felt her stomach drop to somewhere around her ankles. Not here. You'd need a replacement part. So that was it. Stranded. Game over. But I can bypass it. She blinked. What? Temporary fix. Won't last forever, but it'll get you where you're going. How temporary? Should hold for a day, maybe 2. You'll need to get it into a shop after that. 13 minutes. Tori made the calculation in half a second. Do it. Please. He nodded and went back to his truck. This time he returned with a small coil of wire and what looked like electrical connectors. Tori had no idea what he was doing as he spliced into the wiring harness, his fingers moving with practiced speed, twisting connections and securing them with electrical tape. But she could see the concentration on his face, the kind of focus that came from someone who'd solved problems like this 100 times before. The sandwich sat on her passenger seat. Turkey and Swiss on wheat bread made at 5:30 that morning when sleep still felt optional. She'd planned to eat it between meetings, fuel to get through the afternoon. Looking at it now, it seemed like the least she could offer. The stranger twisted 2 wires together, secured them carefully, tucked everything back into place. Try it. She turned the key expecting nothing. The engine roared to life. Smooth, steady, no stuttering. The dashboard looked normal except for one small light suggesting she get the engine checked soon, which under the circumstances felt like a problem for future Tori. Oh my God. She could barely get the words out. You did it. He closed the hood and walked back to her window, wiping his hands on that same destroyed rag. It'll hold, but don't push it. Get it looked at today if you can. 11 minutes. She was already shifting into drive, mind racing through the fastest route, calculating whether she could shave 2 minutes by taking the service road. How much do I owe you? Nothing. I can't just, you saved my entire career, I have to give you something. Don't need anything. He started walking back toward his truck, and Tori felt something crack open in her chest. This stranger had given her back her future and wanted nothing in return, not even acknowledgement, and she couldn't let him just disappear. Wait. She grabbed the sandwich from the passenger seat and leaned out the window. Then take this. Turkey and Swiss. I made it this morning. You need it more than I do. He paused, turned back. For the first time, something shifted in his careful expression. Walls cracking just slightly, something almost vulnerable underneath. He looked at the sandwich like it was precious. You sure? Positive. It's the least I can do. He took it carefully, holding it with both hands like it might break. Thanks. Tori reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, pressing it into his grease-stained hand. The embossed letters caught the morning light. Victoria Hayes Strategic Development, Harbor Line Motors. If you ever need anything, call me. I mean it. He glanced at the card, then slipped it into his shirt pocket without reading it. Hope your meeting goes well. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. Tori didn't wait to see him drive away. She was already accelerating back onto I-90, heart-pounding adrenaline burning through her veins like jet fuel. 9 minutes to make a 17-mile drive. She was going to do it if it killed her. The boardroom at Harbor Line Motors occupied the entire 23rd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago's suburbs sprawling toward the horizon. On a normal day, Tori loved this room. It represented everything she'd worked for. Power, influence, the ability to shape decisions that affected thousands of people. Today, it felt like a guillotine. She burst through the doors at 9:07, wind-blown blouse, wrinkled from gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. 12 board members turned to stare with varying expressions of irritation and curiosity. Richard Sullivan sat at the head of the table, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of CEO who'd built Harborline from a regional player into a national contender through sheer force of strategic vision. He raised one eyebrow. "We were beginning to think you'd reconsidered." Tori willed her voice to sound calm instead of like she'd just sprinted from the parking garage. "Car trouble on the highway, it's handled." She set her bag down with hands that were only slightly trembling, pulled out her laptop, connected it to the presentation system. The familiar ritual of preparation gave her 3 seconds to center herself, to push down the adrenaline and find the version of Victoria Hayes who belonged in this room. "Shall we begin?" The next 45 minutes were a blur of slides and data points of fielding sharp questions from executives who'd been doing this since before she was born. Garrett Hastings, early 40s board member, with the kind of old-guard skepticism that treated innovation like a personal insult, leaned forward around minute 30. "Ambitious timeline. You're certain about these thermal projections?" Tori met his eyes without flinching. "I've stress-tested every assumption. We can deliver." She'd spent 3 months living with these numbers, had built contingencies for. Contingencies had war-gamed every possible objection, and somewhere around minute 35, she felt the shift in the room. The skeptical expressions softening into genuine curiosity, the pointed questions becoming engaged discussion. Richard leaned forward in his chair, and Tori knew she'd hooked him. When she clicked to the final slide, silence filled the boardroom for 3 full seconds. Then Richard smiled. "Well," he glanced at his watch, "that was worth waiting 7 minutes for." Laughter rippled around the table, and Tori felt the tension drain from her shoulders like water through a broken dam. "The partnership proposal is approved pending legal review." Richard's voice carried the weight of finality. "But I think I speak for everyone here when I say this is exactly the kind of forward-thinking strategy Harborline needs." "Well done, Tori," the other board members murmured agreement. As the meeting broke up and executives filed out discussing next steps and implementation timelines, Richard pulled her aside. "Impressive work." His voice dropped to something private. "But next time leave 30 minutes earlier." Despite everything, Tori laughed. "Noted." "I'm serious. You've got the talent. Don't let logistics be what holds you back." She gathered her things and headed down to the parking garage where her BMW sat looking innocent, like it hadn't nearly destroyed her entire morning. The engine started smoothly when she turned the key, that temporary fix holding, just like the stranger had promised. Tori sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, adrenaline finally starting to fade into exhaustion. She'd been so focused on the meeting, on saving her presentation, that she hadn't had time to fully process what had happened on that highway. A complete stranger had stopped to help her, had spent over 30 minutes diagnosing and fixing a problem that wasn't his responsibility, had refused payment, refused anything except a sandwich she'd made at 5:30 in the morning. Who did that anymore? She pulled out her phone, typed a reminder to take the car to the dealership, then paused, stared at the screen. She didn't even know his name. The BMW dealership service manager examined her engine bay with the expression of someone encountering a puzzle that didn't quite fit the manual. He whistled low through his teeth. "Somebody did a bypass on your fuel pump relay." He straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Clean work, too. This wasn't a dealership repair." "How long would it have taken you to fix?" He checked his computer, scrolling through parts availability. "We'd have had to order the relay. 2 days minimum before we could even start." "Who did this for you?" "Just someone who stopped to help." The service manager looked at her like she'd described encountering a unicorn on the interstate. "Well, whoever they were, they knew what they were doing. This isn't amateur work." He gestured at the bypass. "I'd hire them." Tori drove home that evening with a properly installed relay and a bill that made her wince. The car ran perfectly. The crisis had been averted. The meeting had been a success. Her career was still on track. She should have been celebrating. Instead, she sat in her pristine downtown condo, all glass and chrome, and carefully curated emptiness, staring out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about grease-stained hands and a quiet voice and someone who'd refused money but accepted a sandwich like it was worth more than gold. Her laptop sat on the coffee table. After 20 minutes of trying to focus on emails and failing, she opened a search engine. Typed mechanic Chicago fuel pump bypass. Nothing useful. Generic results about repair shops and mobile services. She tried BMW relay repair roadside. Still nothing that helped her find one specific person who'd been in one specific place at 7:30 that morning. Tori stared at her business card on the desk. The embossed letters caught the lamplight. Victoria Hayes Strategic Development Harbor Line Motors. He had her contact information. If he ever needed anything, he knew how to reach her. The question was, would he? She fell asleep that night with her phone on the nightstand, wondering if a stranger who refused payment would ever call to collect on gratitude he didn't seem to want. 3 days passed like water through fingers. Tori threw herself into work partnership implementation, legal review coordination, supplier negotiations, the kind of high-stakes project management that had earned her the VP track in the first place. She didn't think about the stranger on the highway. That was a lie. She thought about him at odd moments, waiting for her coffee to brew, stuck in traffic, lying awake at 3 in the morning when her brain refused to shut off. But she didn't dwell on it. There was a difference. Friday evening found her working late in her office, the executive floor mostly empty except for the ambient hum of the building's climate control. The city sprawled beyond her window. Millions of people living their lives in those glowing rectangles of light, and she knew exactly none of them beyond their professional utility. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost declined. Telemarketers and spam calls had trained her to ignore anything without a contact name, but something made her answer. "This is Victoria Hayes." Silence on the other end, long enough that she almost hung up. Then, "Hi, this is probably weird, but you gave me your card a few days ago on I-90. Tori's breath caught. She knew that voice, quiet, careful with words, the same tone that had said, "I've got tools," like it was the simplest thing in the world. "I remember." Her professional mask slipped just slightly. "Is your truck okay?" A pause, then something that might have been a laugh. "Truck's fine. I'm actually calling because, okay, this is going to sound strange, but I wanted to say thank you for the sandwich." Tori blinked at her computer screen. "You called to thank me for a sandwich you already thanked me for. It was a really good sandwich." Despite everything, the stress, the exhaustion, the 3 months of 18-hour days, she smiled. It was turkey and Swiss on wheat, nothing special. It was lunch. His voice carried something deeper than the words. "I hadn't eaten breakfast, was going to skip lunch too. I usually do when I'm working. But that sandwich, I don't know. It mattered." The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable in a way that suggested he didn't usually share things like this with strangers. "I'm glad it helped." Tori found herself leaning forward in her chair, phone pressed closer to her ear, like proximity might tell her more about this man who helped people and skipped meals. "I also wanted to apologize for not introducing myself properly that morning. I was focused on the repair. Anyway, I'm Marcus. Marcus Reed." "It's nice to officially meet you, Marcus." She could hear him breathing on the other end, not nervousness exactly, but the sound of someone who wasn't used to phone conversations with strangers who gave them business cards. "Can I buy you dinner?" The words came out before she'd fully thought them through. Properly this time, not just handing you a sandwich on a highway. Long silence. Long enough that Tori started composing the polite backpedaling in her head. "You don't have to do that." "I know. I want to." She kept her voice steady. "You helped me when you didn't have to. And I'm curious how you knew to fix that relay when my dealership said it would take 2 days. Another pause. She could almost hear him considering weighing options. Okay. He said it quietly, like he was surprising himself. Yeah, dinner would be nice. They made plans for Sunday evening. A small place Marcus knew in Elk Grove Village. Nothing fancy, he said, but the food was good and honest. Tori agreed and hung up, staring at her phone for a full minute afterward. She had no idea why she'd invited him to dinner. Professional courtesy. Simple curiosity. The nagging sense that a man who bypassed fuel pump relays on highway shoulders shouldn't be eating turkey sandwiches because he skipped too many meals. All of the above, probably. She packed up her laptop and headed home, realizing for the first time all week that she was smiling. Mama Rose's family kitchen occupied a corner of a strip mall in Elk Grove Village, the kind of place you'd drive past 100 times without noticing. Vinyl booths the color of old Coca-Cola signs. A jukebox in the corner playing Motown. The smell of something cooking that reminded Tori of Sunday dinners. She'd never actually had her childhood, had been frozen meals and microwave popcorn, her father too busy with his Mustang restoration to notice what constituted nutrition. She arrived 15 minutes early, which was unlike her. Spent an embarrassing amount of time in her car, deciding if dark jeans and a cashmere sweater was too casual or trying too hard, ultimately settling on the fact that Marcus had seen her windblown and desperate on a highway shoulder, so anything was an improvement. His truck pulled into the parking lot at exactly 6 o'clock. He'd made an effort too, she could tell. Clean flannel shirt with actual creases like it had been ironed, no visible grease stains on his hands. Hair freshly trimmed, but the work boots were the same, broken in and comfortable, like he'd drawn a line between presentable and pretending to be someone else. Hi. He walked over with that same quiet confidence she remembered from the highway. Up close, she could see details she'd missed before: gray eyes that looked tired but kind, a scar along his jawline that had faded to silver calluses on his palms when he shook her hand. Found the place okay? GPS is a miracle of modern technology. Tori smiled. Thanks for meeting me. Thanks for the invitation. Inside, the owner greeted them, a woman in her 60s with warm eyes and an accent that suggested English was a second language learned well, but not first. Marcus. She lit up like he'd made her entire evening just by walking through the door. Finally, you brought someone special. She grabbed 2 menus and led them to a corner booth, talking the entire way about how Marcus hadn't visited in months. And she'd started to worry, was he eating properly? Did he need her to send food home with him because she knew he didn't cook? Marcus looked slightly embarrassed, but didn't correct her. Just traded gentle jokes in return. Yes. Rose, he was eating. Knows he hadn't forgotten about her. Life had just been busy. When they were finally seated and alone, Tori leaned forward. She seems to really care about you. Rose has known me since I moved to the neighborhood. He stopped. Reset. After my wife passed. Sarah. 4 years ago. The information landed like a stone in still water. Tori felt the ripples spread outward, rearranging everything she'd assumed about this man. I'm sorry. Thanks. He changed the subject with the smoothness of someone who'd had this conversation too many times. What about you, Chicago native? Ohio originally? She let him redirect, recognizing the boundaries being set. Came here for work, never left. They ordered. Rose insisted on the meatloaf, special mashed potatoes and green beans like your mama used to make, she said, which was hilarious because Tori's mother had never made anything more complicated than boxed mac and cheese. But she didn't correct it. The conversation found its rhythm. Marcus asked about her work, what it was like in corporate America. Tori found herself telling him things she didn't usually share, how lonely it could be at the top, how exhausting it was to always be proving herself worthy of the space she occupied. I used to work on engines with my dad. The admission surprised her. Old Mustang he was restoring. He never let me touch it, said girls would break things, so I taught myself everything about cars just to prove him wrong. Marcus smiled. Small, but genuine. Did it work? He died before I could show him. Tori took a sip of water. Heart attack when I was 20, but I made it to the automotive industry anyway, so there's that. That's impressive. Engineering background, business side. But I know enough to be dangerous. She met his eyes across the table. What about you? You clearly know your way around an engine. He was quiet for a moment, that same careful consideration she'd heard on the phone. Used to work in the industry. Detroit mostly. Design work for the big three. Long time ago. Tori felt something click into place, the surgical precision under her hood, the way he'd diagnosed the problem in seconds, the confidence that came from years of professional expertise. Wait, you're an engineer. Was. He emphasized the past tense. Not anymore. Before she could ask what happened, his phone buzzed on the table. His entire demeanor changed, shoulders tensing, jaw tightening, the relaxed version of Marcus vanishing behind walls she couldn't see. I'm sorry, I need to take this. He was outside before she could respond, phone already at his ear. Through the window, Tori watched him pace the parking lot, freehand running through his hair in a gesture that spoke of stress or worry or both. Rose appeared at the table with a knowing expression. Everything okay? I think so. He got a call. Ah, probably his daughter. Rose started clearing their appetizer plates. Maya. 8 years old, sweet as sugar. Usually stays with the neighbor when Marcus goes out, but she gets nervous sometimes. His daughter. The information rearranged everything again. Wife dead 4 years ago. 8-year-old daughter. Engineering career in Detroit. Somehow abandoned. A whole life she knew nothing about. He's a good father. Rose patted Tori's shoulder. Best man I know. Sarah would be proud of how he's raised that little girl alone. You're lucky he stopped for you that day. Marcus returned 5 minutes later, looking apologetic and tired. I'm sorry about that. My daughter was worried because I wasn't home yet. She's staying with Mrs. Din Chen next door, but she gets anxious when routines change. He pulled out his wallet. I should probably head back. Of course. The evening felt unfinished, like a story interrupted mid-sentence. But Tori understood. An 8-year-old who'd lost her mother got nervous when her father didn't come home on time, and that took priority over meatloaf and getting-to-know-you conversation with a woman he'd met once on a highway. They argued briefly over the bill before Marcus paid in cash enough to cover the meal and a generous tip for Rose. In the parking lot, standing between their vehicles, Marcus looked at her with something complicated in his expression. I know I didn't talk much about myself. It's not that I don't trust you, you don't owe me your life story. Tori kept her voice gentle. We barely know each other. Right. Yeah. He looked relieved. But if you want to know each other better, maybe we could do this again sometime when I don't have to run off in the middle of dessert. I'd like that. They exchanged phone numbers properly this time, and Tori watched him drive away in his old truck before getting into her BMW. She sat there for a moment, processing the evening, trying to understand why she felt simultaneously satisfied and unsettled. Marcus Reed was a good man. That much was obvious. Kind, skilled, devoted to his daughter. But there was something underneath all that, something he was carrying that made him stop for strangers on highways and refuse payment and work odd jobs instead of engineering for the big three. She wanted to understand what that something was. Tori started her car and headed home through Chicago's Friday night traffic, already planning when she could reasonably text him again without seeming too eager. Her condo felt emptier than usual that night. All chrome and glass and expensive emptiness purchased with bonuses and overtime and relationships, sacrificed on the altar of career advancement. Tori changed into pajamas, made tea she wouldn't drink, settled onto her couch with her laptop. The search bar taunted her. She typed Marcus Reed automotive engineering patents. The results loaded, and Tori felt her breath catch. MIT graduate. Mechanical engineering. 12 patents on battery thermal management systems for electric vehicles. Technical papers published in SAE international journals. Awards and accolades. A photo from 6 years ago. Marcus at the Detroit Auto Show Engineering Conference, speaking to a packed room looking confident and engaged, and nothing like the careful man who'd bypassed her fuel pump relay. Listed as Senior Design Engineer at Ford Advanced Engineering from 2016 to 2020. He hadn't just been an engineer, he'd been one of the best. She clicked through article after article, building a picture of who Marcus had been before someone at the cutting edge of EV technology, someone whose innovations were now industry standard, someone who'd apparently walked away from all of it 4 years ago. The timeline matched. Sarah's death, his disappearance from the industry, 4 years of silence. Tori stared at the laptop screen until the words blurred. A man like that doesn't just disappear unless something broke him. She closed the browser, opened a different window, pulled up Harborline's internal project files. The EV integration project, 18 months in development. Thermal management problems that had stumped 6 engineers for 3 months. No solution in sight. An idea formed dangerous, possibly brilliant, definitely crossing a line between professional opportunity and personal manipulation. She could bring Marcus to Harborline, show him the problem, see if that same surgical precision that had diagnosed her BMW in 60 seconds could do what 6 MIT graduates couldn't. It would mean ambushing him, using their friendship, if that's what this was, to pull him back into a world he'd deliberately left. It would mean risking the fragile connection they'd started building over meatloaf and unfinished conversations. But it would also mean giving him a chance to use gifts that were too valuable to waste on odd jobs and highway rescues. It would mean proving to him that his skills still mattered, that walking away from Ford didn't have to mean walking away from who he was meant to be. Tori pulled out her phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed again. "Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Something important to discuss. Trust me." Her finger hovered over send for a full 30 seconds. Then she pressed it. The response came 10 minutes later when she'd almost convinced herself to unsend it. "Is this about work?" Tori stared at the question. Technically, yes. Functionally, it was about so much more than work, about second chances and wasted potential, and the conviction that some people deserved to be pulled back from the edges they'd retreated to. She typed, "Just trust me." Long pause, long enough that she started composing the apology in her head. Then, okay. Where and when? Tori sent him the address for Harborline Motors, suggested 9 in the morning, told him to text when he arrived. Then she sat on her couch in her empty condo, staring at the city lights and wondering if she was about to help Marcus Reed or destroy the careful equilibrium he'd built in the wreckage of his life. Some debts couldn't be paid with money, but maybe they could be paid with opportunity, with the chance to be whole again. She'd find out tomorrow. Marcus arrived at Harborline Motors headquarters with the wary expression of a man walking into a trap he couldn't quite identify. Tori met him in the lobby, all glass and steel, and corporate ambition made architectural, and watched his eyes track across the soaring atrium, the modern art installations, the implicit message that this building cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. "Thank you for trusting me." He studied her face like he was reading a schematic. "Should I be nervous?" "Probably." She led him to the elevator keycard required for the restricted floors. Marcus followed without speaking, that same quiet patience she'd seen on the highway. But she could feel the tension radiating off him, the way his shoulders had gone tight, his hands sliding into his pockets like he was stopping himself from reaching for something. The elevator opened on the R&D lab, and Marcus stopped breathing. Massive space. Workbenches and diagnostic equipment and prototype EV chassis in various states of assembly. Engineers moving between stations, their conversations a mix of technical jargon and creative problem-solving. This was his world, the one he'd walked away from. Tori watched him freeze in the doorway, watched something complicated move across his face. Recognition and longing and fear all tangled together. We're 18 months into a project that's supposed to revolutionize Harbor Line's EV position. She kept her voice neutral, professional. But we're stuck. A woman looked up from a diagnostic monitor, early 30s, Korean-American sharp eyes that missed nothing. Diane Park, senior engineer and the closest thing this project had to a savior, which meant she'd been failing spectacularly for 3 months and knew it. "Who's this? Diane Park meet Marcus Reed." Diane's eyes went wide, actually wide, like Tori had just introduced her to a celebrity she'd assumed was dead. "Wait, the Marcus Reed." She set down her tablet and walked over that academic excitement of someone encountering a legend. The Detroit Engineering Journal paper on battery thermal dynamics. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "You read that? Read it." "I cited it in my thesis at University of Michigan." Diane was practically vibrating now. "That paper changed how I think about heat dissipation in EV systems." "What are you doing here?" Marcus glanced at Tori. The look said, "You ambushed me, and I should have seen this coming, and what the hell am I doing here all at once?" "I invited him to consult." Tori kept her tone light. "Fresh eyes on the integration problem." Diane didn't wait for permission. Just pulled up schematics on the nearest monitor, talking fast about battery pack thermal spikes during rapid discharge, every cooling solution, adding weight, or creating failure points. 6 engineers and 3 months of work, producing nothing useful. Marcus stood silent, studying the schematic with that same focused attention he'd given her BMW's engine bay. 60 seconds of complete concentration, while engineers started gathering curious about the stranger in street clothes standing, where only lab coats usually tread. Then he pointed to a section of the design. "You're routing coolant wrong." His voice was quiet but certain. "See here, you're fighting natural heat distribution instead of working with it. Reverse this flow path, add a secondary buffer here." He traced the correction with his finger. 15% temperature reduction. No weight added. Diane stared at the screen, then at Marcus, then back at the screen. "That's..." She turned to the engineer standing next to her. "Why didn't we see that?" Marcus shrugged that same self-deprecating gesture from the highway. "You're too close to it. Been staring at this design for months. You see what you expect instead of what's actually there. Any competent engineer would spot it eventually," another engineer offered. Diane cut him off. "We've had 6 competent engineers looking at this for 3 months. He saw it in 60 seconds. The room went quiet, that particular silence that comes when everyone realizes they've been made to look foolish by someone who wasn't even trying. Marcus looked distinctly uncomfortable with the attention, glanced at Tori like, "Can we leave now? And you knew this would happen, and I don't belong here anymore." Richard Sullivan appeared in the lab doorway. Tori's stomach dropped. She hadn't planned this, hadn't anticipated that the CEO would be monitoring security cameras on a Saturday morning, hadn't considered that bringing an unauthorized consultant into the restricted R&D floor might trigger executive interest. Richard walked toward them with the measured pace of a predator who'd already won. Silver hair, sharp suit even on the weekend, eyes that could read a balance sheet or a person with equal precision. "Mr. Reed," he extended his hand. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Marcus sat in Richard Sullivan's office, panoramic city view furniture that cost more than his truck, and tried to remember how to breathe in rooms like this. Tori had positioned herself by the window, carefully neutral, while Richard asked him to explain the thermal solution in detail. It started as a simple explanation, became an interrogation. 20 minutes of technical discussion where Richard tested every assumption, probed every claim, pushed back on conclusions to see if Marcus actually understood what he was suggesting or had just gotten lucky. The questions were sharp, designed to expose weakness. Marcus answered them all. He couldn't help it. This was what he'd been trained for, translating complex engineering concepts into language that board members and executives could grasp, making the invisible visible through analogy and clarity. He'd forgotten how good he was at this, how much he'd missed the particular satisfaction of watching comprehension dawn in someone's eyes. Richard leaned back in his chair when they finished studying Marcus with an expression that suggested he'd just discovered something valuable. "Mr. Reed, I'd like to offer you a consulting position. 3 months part-time work from home when possible." He named a rate that made Marcus's throat tight. "Considerably higher than staff positions. You'll report to Tori on the EV integration project." The offer hung in the air like smoke. Marcus could feel Tori watching him, could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on his chest. This was what she'd wanted, what she'd planned when she sent that cryptic text message asking him to trust her. "I have a daughter." The words came out harder than he intended. "She's my first priority. Non-negotiable." Richard didn't even blink. "Understood. We're not asking for 60-hour weeks. Strategic intervention when and where it matters most." "I need to think about it." Marcus stood, that fight-or-flight instinct screaming at him to get out of this office, away from the temptation of being useful again. "Talk to my daughter. Can I call you Monday?" Richard handed him a business card. "My direct line. Take all the time you need." The parking garage felt like a confessional. Concrete pillars and echoes, and the two of them alone in the fluorescent silence. Marcus turned to face Tori and let the carefully maintained neutrality crack. "You ambushed me." She didn't deny it, didn't apologize, just stood there in her perfect cashmere sweater and her perfect leather bag and said, "I did. I'm not sorry." "You don't know if I'm ready for this." His voice stayed level through sheer force of will. "What if I fail? What if I fall back into old patterns? You won't. You can't know that." Tori stepped closer, close enough that he could see the determination in her eyes, the absolute conviction that she knew what was best for him better than he knew himself. "You're right. I can't. But I know what I saw on that highway. Someone who couldn't walk past a problem without fixing it. Someone with skills that were too good to waste on parking garages and odd jobs. Those skills nearly cost me everything." "No." Her voice went sharp. "Working 80-hour weeks cost you, not the skills themselves, and you're not that person anymore." The truth of it hit like a fist to the sternum. She was right. He wasn't the man who'd missed Sarah's symptoms because he was too busy chasing the next patent, the next breakthrough, the next validation from people who didn't matter. He'd rebuilt himself from ash and guilt into someone who showed up for Maya, who put her first, who chose presence over prestige. But standing here in this parking garage, feeling the pull of that lab upstairs like gravity, he didn't know if he could trust himself not to slip. "Why does this matter so much to you?" Tori took a breath, seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "Because when you stopped on that highway, you reminded me there are still people who help without expecting anything in return. You became someone I actually look forward to talking to. Someone real in a world that feels increasingly fake." She paused. "If I can give back even a fraction of what you gave me a chance to use your gifts while still being Maya's father, then it matters. You matter to me, as a friend." The last word landed with strange weight. Friend. Like she was drawing a boundary even as she crossed every other line by bringing him here. Marcus searched her face, trying to understand what she wanted from him, what this actually was. "I'll call you Monday." He moved toward his truck. "Either way." He could feel her watching as he drove away, could feel the invisible threads she'd tied around his ribs pulling him back toward a life he'd deliberately burned to the ground. Maya was building a volcano at the kitchen table when Marcus got home baking soda and vinegar construction paper, painted to look like lava poster board with facts about plate tectonics written in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. Mrs. Chen had already left the neighbor's patient presence, replaced by the comfortable chaos of an afternoon project. "How was your morning?" Maya didn't look up from cutting out a palm tree. "Interesting." Marcus pulled out a chair, watching his daughter work with the same focused intensity she brought to everything. Sarah's concentration, his hands. "I saw something today I haven't seen in a long time. A place where I used to belong." Maya set down her scissors, studied him with eyes that saw too much. "Like the lab where you worked at Ford." "Yeah, sweetheart, like that." She went quiet. That particular silence that meant she was thinking hard about something important. "Do you want to go back?" The question shouldn't have surprised him. Maya asked the hard things had learned early, that life didn't wait for you to be ready before it demanded answers. "I don't know." Marcus picked up the glue stick, helped her attach the palm tree to the volcano's base. "I'm scared I'll mess up again. Miss the important things." Maya looked at him with Sarah's eyes and said the simplest, most devastating truth. "You don't miss me now." Marcus pulled her into a hug, this impossibly wise child who shouldn't have to worry about whether her father was happy, who'd already lost too much, and somehow still had the courage to tell him it was okay to try. "No, baby. I don't miss you. Ever." "Then you won't miss me if you go back." She pulled away, went back to her volcano, like she'd just solved a complex equation. "You're different now." Sunday evening, Marcus called Tori earlier than he'd promised. Couldn't stand another day of Maya watching him be scared. "I know I said Monday, but you were probably going crazy waiting." He paced his small living room phone pressed to his ear. "We're in." "When do I start?" He could hear the smile in Tori's voice. Relief and triumph mixed together. "Wednesday. I'll email you the details." After they hung up, Marcus stood at his window watching Chicago's Sunday traffic and wondered what the hell he'd just agreed to. Whether Tori Hayes had saved him or just given him enough rope to hang himself with. Either way, there was no going back now. Wednesday morning, Marcus showed up at Harborline wearing new clothes that still had creases from the package. Dark jeans, button-down shirt, work boots because he drew the line at pretending to be someone who wore dress shoes. His hair was freshly cut. His hands were clean, really clean, not just surface clean like he'd scrubbed away 4 years of odd jobs and highway repairs to reveal the engineer underneath. Tori introduced him to the team. Diane welcomed him with academic enthusiasm. Others looked curious or skeptical, or both. Marcus settled at the workstation they'd assigned him and pulled up the project files. 4 hours disappeared like water through his fingers. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed this, the particular satisfaction of solving problems that mattered, of seeing patterns emerge from chaos, of translating theoretical understanding into practical application. The team gathered around his whiteboard as he sketched thermal flow diagrams, explaining patiently when someone didn't follow, building on their questions to refine the solution. It felt like coming home after a long exile, like remembering a language he'd thought he'd forgotten. Diane knocked on Tori's office door around 1 o'clock with an expression somewhere between awe and disbelief. "He completely redesigned the battery thermal system." She set her tablet on the desk, pulled up Marcus's schematics. "Not tweaked. Fundamentally reconceived the entire approach. If it works the way he's describing, we just leapfrogged every competitor in efficiency and safety." Tori walked to the lab, stood in the doorway watching Marcus surrounded by engineers, all of them talking over each other with the excited energy that came from breakthrough moments. He was explaining something with his hands, drawing invisible diagrams in the air, completely absorbed. He caught her eye across the room and smiled. The moment stretched longer than it should have. Something passed between them that felt different than friendship, more complicated than professional respect. Tori's heart jumped in her chest and she didn't understand why. She turned away before anyone could notice. December arrived with early darkness and holiday parties neither of them particularly wanted to attend. Marcus maintained his boundaries like they were carved in stone, left at 3:30 every day to pick up Maya from school, turned down evening strategy dinners, made it clear that his daughter's schedule took priority over everything else. Richard seemed surprised the first time Marcus refused an after-hours meeting. "I have dinner with my daughter at 6, non-negotiable." Richard studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. We'll schedule around you." Tori watched the exchange from across the conference room and felt something shift in her chest. Pride, maybe, or the recognition that Marcus was proving it was possible you could be brilliant at your work and still put family first. You didn't have to sacrifice everything to be valuable. They fell into routines without planning it. Morning coffee runs where they'd talk about everything and nothing, walks during lunch breaks when the weather wasn't actively trying to kill them. Marcus told her about Maya's latest obsession with veterinary medicine, about terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings, about the small joys of a life built deliberately small. Tori told him about the loneliness of corner offices, about broken engagement to someone who'd demanded she choose between him and her career, about waking up at 29 and realizing she had everything she'd worked for and no one to share it with. The company holiday party happened in mid-December. Mandatory attendance for executives, which meant Tori spent 2 hours making conversation with board members and pretending she enjoyed small talk. She found herself watching Marcus across the room, laughing with Diane, showing a junior engineer something on his tablet, checking his phone when Maya texted. The realization hit her like a physical blow. I'm in love with him. Not infatuation, not gratitude for helping her on the highway, not professional admiration for his brilliance. The real thing. The kind that changed your entire understanding of what you wanted from life. Tori left the party early. Sat in her car in the parking garage, processing the admission, trying to understand when friendship had become something else entirely. Marcus was still putting pieces back together, still figuring out how to be both father and professional. He didn't need her feelings making everything complicated. He needed stability. Friendship, support, not romantic pressure from someone who'd already changed his entire life. She could manage this, be professional, keep her distance. He never had to know. 2 weeks later, Marcus called about Maya's science fair. His voice carried that particular awkwardness of someone asking for help they weren't sure they deserved. "This is going to sound weird, but would you maybe want to come as a friend? For moral support. She's been working on this volcano project and she's nervous." Tori found herself saying yes before she'd fully considered what it meant stepping into his life beyond Harborline's walls, meeting the daughter, who was the reason for every boundary he maintained. Saturday morning at Lincoln Elementary, the gymnasium transformed into a maze of student projects, solar systems, and plant growth experiments, and Maya's baking soda volcano with hand-drawn posters about plate tectonics. Marcus introduced them carefully. "Maya, this is my friend Tori from work." Maya studied Tori with disconcerting intensity. 8 years old, going on 30, dark curly hair like her mother. Eyes that evaluated without judgment. "You're very pretty." Tori smiled. "Thank you." "I hear you're building a volcano." What followed was 45 minutes of helping Maya fix a drooping poster, discussing veterinary school requirements, like they were talking to a college student, watching Marcus watch his daughter with such obvious love that Tori felt something crack open in her chest. This was when it fully hit her. Not just Marcus the engineer, not just Marcus the man who'd saved her on a highway. Marcus, the father. Marcus choosing to build a life around someone else's needs. Marcus being the kind of parent Tori's father had never been. Walking to the parking lot after Maya between them, the little girl looked up with devastating directness. "Are you going to be my dad's girlfriend?" Marcus went rigid. "Maya," Tori felt her face heat. "We're friends, sweetie." "Oh, okay." Maya seemed to consider this. "But you're nice, and Daddy smiles when he talks about you." "That's enough." Car. Now. Maya ran ahead, leaving them standing in awkward silence. I'm sorry. Marcus looked mortified. She's direct. She's wonderful. Tori meant it. You're doing an amazing job with her. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition maybe, or possibility, or the acknowledgement that boundaries were harder to maintain than either of them had anticipated. Tori drove home alone and cried in her car. Because she loved him. Loved Maya, and could never tell him either thing without destroying the careful equilibrium they'd built. Monday morning, a man stepped out from behind a pillar in Harbor Line's executive parking garage. Garrett Hastings. Board member. Early 40s with the kind of polished ruthlessness that came from years of hostile takeovers and corporate warfare. Mr. Reed, moment of your time. Marcus followed him to an empty conference room, instinct screaming that this wasn't a friendly conversation. Garrett opened a briefcase, slid a document across the table. I've been impressed with your work. Very impressed. He leaned back with the confidence of someone who'd already won. I represent investors in Apex Motors. We're developing a competing EV platform. This is a consulting offer, $500,000 for 6 months of your expertise. Marcus looked at the number. More than he'd made in 4 years combined. Enough to give Maya everything private school college fund at University of Michigan security he couldn't provide fixing parking garages. You're asking me to leave Harbor Line? We're asking you to make the smart financial choice. You have a daughter to think about. Marcus slid the document back across the table like it was contaminated. I'm not for sale. Garrett's expression hardened. You should reconsider. Life is expensive. Loyalty doesn't pay tuition. Maybe not. Marcus stood. But I can look my daughter in the eye when I tuck her in at night. Can you... He left before Garrett could respond. But the threat was clear in the way the older man watched him go. This wasn't over. Late afternoon, Marcus found Tyler Brooks struggling at a workstation. 23, fresh from University of Illinois, African-American kid with talent and crippling imposter syndrome written all over his face. What's wrong? Tyler didn't look up. This thermal coupling calculation. I've run it 6 times. Keeps giving impossible results. I'm not smart enough for this. Marcus pulled up a chair, looked at the work with the same patience he'd given Tori's BMW. You're making one small assumption error. Here, he pointed. But the real issue isn't the math. It's that you're ready to give up. Tyler started to protest, and Marcus cut him off. My father taught me something when I was about your age working on his Chevy in the garage. He said the best solutions come from the worst frustrations. When you want to quit, that's when you're closest to breakthrough. He walked Tyler through the correction, watched the solution emerge, saw the moment comprehension and pride replaced doubt. Thank you. Tyler's voice was quiet. I want to be like you someday. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Legacy. Not just patents or papers or innovations that would outlive him, but passing knowledge forward to someone who'd pass it forward again. You'll be better. You're already asking the right questions. After Tyler left, Marcus sat alone, realizing he was building something that mattered beyond thermal management systems. Something that would last. 2 months into their new roles, Tori started pulling away. She didn't mean to, didn't plan it. But loving Marcus while pretending she didn't was exhausting in ways she hadn't anticipated. So she skipped morning coffee, stopped responding to texts immediately, avoided eye contact in meetings. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. He cornered her in the parking garage one evening when most of the building had emptied out his expression somewhere between hurt and confusion. What's going on with you? Tori deflected. Nothing. Just maintaining professional boundaries. Since when have we needed professional boundaries? He stepped closer. You've been pulling away for weeks. If I did something wrong, tell me. You didn't do anything wrong. Then what? His voice cracked slightly. Because I can't keep guessing. Can't keep wondering if you regret bringing me here if you're done with our friendship now that we're colleagues. The words hit like physical blows. Because he thought she regretted him. Thought she was pulling away because she'd gotten what she wanted, a brilliant engineer to solve her problems, and didn't need him anymore. That's not... Her voice broke. I can't do this anymore. Do what? The question hung between them. All the space for honesty she'd been avoiding. Tori felt her walls crumbling. 2 months of hiding, of lying, of pretending she only cared about him professionally. She was so tired. I'm in love with you. The admission came out raw. I've been in love with you since December, maybe longer. And I know the timing is terrible. I know you don't feel the same way, but that's what's wrong. Seeing you every day and pretending I only care about you as a colleague is breaking me apart. Silence. Long enough that Tori wanted to run to take it back to pretend she'd never said anything. Marcus stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. You think I don't feel the same way? Tori's breath caught. What? You think I stopped by your office 5 times a day for work reasons? He moved closer. Texted you photos of things that made me think of you because we're colleagues. I've been terrified of saying anything because you're the person who gave me my life back. I didn't want to ruin that by admitting that somewhere along the way, friendship stopped being enough. He was inches away now, close enough that she could see the gray flecks in his eyes, could count his heartbeats in the pulse at his throat. I'm in love with you, Tori. Have been for months. The confession rearranged everything. All her careful planning, all her professional distance, all her certainty that he could never want her the way she wanted him. Marcus cupped her face with hands that still carried calluses from years of honest work, leaned in slowly enough that she could have stopped him. She didn't. The kiss started tentative, questioning, then deeper as weeks of suppressed feeling poured into it. His hands in her hair, her fingers gripping his shirt. Everything they'd been holding back finally given permission to exist. Then Marcus pulled away. Something shifted in his expression. Fear replacing joy. Walls slamming back into place. Wait. He stepped back. What's wrong? This is too much. Panic edged into his voice. I can't, Maya. What if this doesn't work? What if I mess this up too? You won't. You don't know that. He was backing toward his truck now. I couldn't save Sarah. I missed every sign because I was too focused on work. What if I'm so focused on you that I miss something with Maya? What if she gets attached to you and then loses someone else? Marcus, that's not going to happen. I can't risk it. His voice broke. I can't risk her getting hurt again. She's just starting to be okay. This was a mistake. He fumbled for his truck keys. I need to focus on being her father. That's all I can handle right now. Don't do this. Tori heard the desperation in her own voice. We can figure it out together. I'm sorry, I can't. He drove away, left her standing alone in the parking garage, hand pressed against the pillar for support, watching his taillights disappear. The kiss still burned on her lips. His confession still echoed in her ears. I'm in love with you. But he'd chosen Maya over her. Chosen safety over risk. Chosen to run rather than trust that maybe possibly they could make this work. Tori slid down the pillar until she was sitting on cold concrete. Let herself cry for the first time in years. Not elegant tears. The ugly, gasping kind that came from having hope and losing it in the span of 5 minutes. She'd gotten exactly what she deserved. Had pulled Marcus back into a world he'd left, had inserted herself into his life, had fallen in love without permission. And now, she had nothing. Natalie found Tori at her desk the next morning, looking like she'd fought a war and lost. No makeup to hide the evidence, blouse wrinkled, coffee untouched and cold. What happened? Tori told her everything. The words came out flat, emotionless, like she was reporting quarterly earnings instead of describing her heart breaking in a parking garage. Natalie pulled her into a hug that Tori didn't know she needed until it was happening. He's scared. Give him time. He made his choice. Tori's voice stayed steady through sheer force of will. I have to respect it. Even if it's the wrong choice. Especially then. Natalie's phone buzzed. Her face went white. Tori, you need to see this. The business news website loaded on Tori's screen. TechCrunch. Headline in bold, Harborline execs workplace romance raises ethics questions. The article detailed everything. Her hiring Marcus. Their relationship. Anonymous sources clearly, Garrett raising concerns about favoritism. Conflicts of interest. The appearance of impropriety. An ethics complaint had been filed with the board. Tori read it twice, felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was Garrett's revenge. Marcus had refused the bribe, so now the board member was destroying them both. Richard summoned her to his office within the hour. Did you know about this? He held up his tablet showing the article. We weren't together when I hired him. Tori kept her voice professional despite the panic clawing at her throat. Feelings developed later. Garrett's calling for an emergency board session. Richard's expression was unreadable. He wants one of you to resign. That's insane. Marcus earned his position. I know that. But optics matter. He sat down heavily. The board will demand answers. The emergency session happened that afternoon. Production timeline review as the official cover, but everyone knew what this was really about. Garrett used every opportunity to attack questioned whether they could trust critical decisions to someone hired under questionable circumstances. Reminded everyone that Marcus's last position at Ford had ended abruptly when personal life interfered. What happens when this relationship fails? Garrett's voice carried across the boardroom. Do we lose our CTO and our VP? Tori defended herself with facts. Marcus didn't report to her. They hadn't violated any policies. But she could see board members murmuring uncomfortable with the optics, even if the ethics were technically sound. Garrett played his final card. I propose we require Mr. Reed to present his complete thermal integration strategy to this board. Solo. No backup from Ms. Hayes. He smiled without warmth. If he can prove his worth independent of this relationship, perhaps we can move forward. It was a trap. Humiliate Marcus publicly. Force him to quit rather than face the scrutiny. Unless Ms. Hayes would prefer to resign herself. Save us all the awkwardness. I'm not going anywhere. Tori met his eyes across the table. Then let's see what Mr. Reed is truly capable of. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Be prepared to defend your life's work. Tori called Marcus after the meeting, heard the exhaustion in his voice when he answered. We have a problem. Garrett leaked our relationship to the press, filed an ethics complaint. The board is demanding you present tomorrow solo. He's trying to force you out. Long silence on the other end. Marcus, I'm here. He sounded defeated. This is my fault. I should never have... Don't! Her voice went sharp. This is Garrett being a vindictive bastard because you wouldn't take his bribe. Not your fault. She could hear him breathing, processing. I'll be there tomorrow. After they hung up, Tori sat in her office staring at the city lights and wondering if she'd destroyed Marcus by bringing him back to this world. Whether her conviction that he deserved a second chance had just cost him everything. Marcus paced his kitchen that evening while Maya did homework at the table. She watched him with those two knowing eyes. What's wrong, Daddy? Remember Tori from the science fair? I like her. I like her too, but some people think it's wrong that I have feelings for her. They think I only got my job because of her. Maya set down her pencil. But that's not true. You're really smart. You help people. The simple faith in her voice made his throat tight. I know, baby, but sometimes the truth doesn't matter as much as what people think. He could walk away, protect Maya from the complications, go back to fixing parking garages and skipping meals and staying safe. Or he could fight. Evening found him driving to Oak Hill Cemetery for the first time in months, stood at Sarah's grave with the cold November wind cutting through his jacket. I don't know what to do. His breath made clouds in the air. I walked away from Tori because I was scared. Scared of messing up again. Scared Maya would get hurt. Wind through bare trees. Silence that felt like listening. But walking away, that's messing up too, isn't it? Teaching her to run when things get hard. He touched the headstone. Simple granite with her name and dates that didn't capture anything about who she'd been. You'd tell me to fight. You always did. Marcus drove to Harborline, found Tori still in her office past midnight staring at presentation slides she'd already memorized. She looked up when he appeared in her doorway. Surprise and hope and fear all tangled in her expression. Marcus, I'm not walking away. He stepped into her office. Not from this job. Not from you. Not from what we built. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Garrett's going to try to destroy you. Let him try. Marcus sat on the edge of her desk. I'll present the work. Prove it stands on its own. And then I'll tell them exactly how I feel about you. Publicly. Tori's breath caught. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. He met her eyes. Because Maya asked me tonight what I was going to do. And I realized, what kind of example am I setting if I run every time I'm scared? She stood, moved close enough that he could see the tears she was fighting. What changed your mind? My daughter. She said, you're really smart. You help people, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Marcus smiled, despite everything. And I thought she's right. I earned this. And I earned you. I'm not giving either up without a fight. But I need to ask you something first. His voice went quiet. Will you come with me tomorrow? Stand beside me when I face them, always. 9 a.m. the next morning, Marcus walked into Harborline's boardroom with Tori at his side. Statement in itself, they weren't hiding, weren't apologizing, weren't pretending this was anything other than what it was. 12 board members, Richard at the head of the table, Garrett sitting with the smug confidence of someone who'd already won. Mr. Reed, Richard's voice was carefully neutral. You're here to present your thermal integration strategy. The floor is yours. Marcus connected his laptop, pulled up the presentation he'd built last night between coffee and panic. 45 slides of technical brilliance translated into language board members could grasp. He started with the problem. 6 engineers, 3 months, no solution. Battery packs that overheated during rapid discharge, every cooling approach, adding weight or creating failure points. Then his approach. Not incremental fixes, but fundamental reconceptualization of heat distribution. Working with the physics instead of fighting them. The data spoke for itself. 15% temperature reduction. No weight penalty. Performance exceeding all projections. Patent already filed. 3 other U.S. manufacturers requesting licensing deals. Diane jumped in from the audience with test results that validated every claim. Tyler stood and testified that Marcus's mentorship had made him a better engineer in 3 months than 2 years at University of Illinois. Marcus watched the board members leaning forward, saw comprehension dawning, saw Garrett's smug expression starting to crack. Then the board member interrupted. Very impressive. But let's address the elephant in the room. Garrett's voice cut across the boardroom. Your relationship with Ms. Hayes. How do we know your judgment isn't compromised? Marcus turned to face him directly. You don't. You'll have to trust the results. That's not good enough. Then let me give you context. Marcus took a breath. Let the walls come down. My wife Sarah died 4 years ago. Cancer. I was working 80-hour weeks for Ford in Dearborn, chasing the next project, the next patent, the next validation from people who didn't matter. I missed the signs that she was sick, missed months with her because I thought my work mattered more than my family. The boardroom went completely silent. I quit engineering because I couldn't forgive myself. Spent 4 years doing odd jobs raising my daughter, convinced I didn't deserve to use my gifts. He looked at Tori. Then Ms. Hayes's car broke down on I-90. I stopped to help. She gave me a sandwich because I was too broke to buy lunch. She didn't know who I was, didn't know about my patents or my time at Ford. She just saw someone who helped her and wanted to say thank you. Back to the board. When she brought me here, it was because she recognized wasted talent. My feelings for her developed later, months later, because she's the most professionally rigorous person I know. She holds me to higher standards than anyone I've ever worked with. If anything, our relationship makes me work harder, not compromise, because I want to be worthy of what she sees in me. Garrett leaned back. This is exactly the kind of emotional justification. You offered me $500,000 to leave Harbor Line. Marcus's voice cut through the interruption. Last month, in the parking garage, a bribe to take Harbor Line's innovations to your investors at Apex Motors. Garrett's face went white. He's lying. There's no proof. You had a briefcase, dark leather combination lock. The offer document had Apex Motors letterhead with their logo blue and silver geometric design. Marcus spoke with the precision that made him good at engineering. You said I should think about my daughter's future. Private school, college fund at University of Michigan. Security that loyalty doesn't provide. I told you I wasn't for sale. You said I'd regret it. Marcus looked at Richard. So he filed a false ethics complaint and leaked our relationship to automotive news. Revenge for refusing corporate espionage. Every board member turned to stare at Garrett. Richard's voice went cold. Is this true, Garrett? He's fabricating. The conversation happened on January 16th. Marcus pulled out his phone. I remember because it was the day after Maya's birthday. Security cameras in the parking garage will show us entering that conference room together. Timestamp 11:23 a.m. We were alone for 14 minutes. Diane stood from her seat in the audience. I can verify the timeline. Marcus mentioned someone approaching him that day. He seemed shaken. Another board member spoke up. I've had concerns about Garrett's outside investments for months. Never had proof. Richard looked at Marcus, then at Garrett, back to Marcus. Mr. Reed, thank you for bringing this to our attention. His voice carried the weight of executive finality. The board will conduct a full investigation into these allegations. Garrett, you're removed from this meeting pending the results. This is absurd. Security will escort you out. Richard gestured to the guards by the door. We'll be in touch. Watching Garrett leave 2 security guards flanking him, his confidence shattered, his leverage. Gunn felt like watching justice served in real time. Richard turned back to Marcus. Your thermal integration strategy is approved. Production plan moves forward immediately. He glanced at the other board members. Unless anyone has objections to Mr. Reed's continued employment, silence. Several board members shook their heads. Then this meeting is adjourned. As people filed out, Richard caught Marcus and Tori before they could leave. That took courage. He looked at Marcus. Standing up here, telling the truth, exposing Garrett's corruption. It was the right thing to do. Still took courage. Richard extended his hand. Welcome to Harbor Line, Mr. Reed. Permanently this time. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in his small apartment kitchen trying to cook chicken and failing spectacularly. Smoke detector going off, Maya laughing. Tori rescuing the situation with competence that made him grateful and slightly embarrassed. You're better at cooking than Daddy, Maya announced this like a revelation. "The bar is very low, sweetie." They ate dinner together, the three of them, plus the chaos of an 8-year-old who asked 100 questions and had opinions about everything. After Tori helped Maya with her drawings while Marcus cleaned up watching them bent over the sketchbook together. Elephants and dogs and cats rendered with careful detail. Dreams of veterinary school discussed like they were talking to a college applicant instead of a third grader. Bedtime found Marcus tucking Maya in that familiar ritual of checking under the bed for monsters and making sure her water glass was full. "I like Tori, Daddy. She's nice." "Yeah, baby. She makes me happy." Maya went quiet. That particular silence that meant she was thinking about something important, like Mommy did. Marcus felt tears start, didn't try to hide them. "It's okay to be happy again, Daddy." Maya's voice carried wisdom she shouldn't have at 8 years old. "Mommy would want that. She told me once that she wanted you to smile even when she was gone." Marcus pulled her into a hug and let himself cry. Really cry. Not the careful tears he'd rationed out over 4 years of grief. "You remember that?" "I remember some things, like how she smelled like vanilla, and how she sang off key, and how she loved you. I miss her so much." "Me too." Maya hugged him tighter. "But I think she'd like Tori, and I think she'd want us to be happy." They cried together. Father and daughter holding on to each other while letting go of the fear that happiness meant forgetting. When Maya fell asleep, Marcus joined Tori in the living room. She could see he'd been crying, didn't ask, just held him while he processed the permission his daughter had given to move forward. Some debts couldn't be paid with money, only time and courage and the willingness to build something new while honoring what came before. 6 months later, the first Harbor Line EV rolled off the production line on a Thursday in August. Marcus stood with the engineering team watching the vehicle's diagnostic readouts, thermal management, performing flawlessly, battery efficiency, exceeding projections, every system green across the board. Tyler appeared at his elbow with a tablet. "Patent application for the secondary cooling buffer just got approved. They're listing you and me as co-inventors." Marcus looked at the young engineer who'd gone from doubting himself to filing patents in 6 months. Legacy wasn't just about what you created, it was about who you helped become. "You did the hard work on that design. You earned it. You taught me how to think about the problem differently." Tyler's voice was quiet. "That conversation in January about not quitting when it's hard, I think about that every time I hit a wall now." That afternoon, Marcus and Tori presented at Cobo Center in Detroit. Industry conference packed with engineers and executives, all of them curious about Harbor Line's breakthrough thermal system. Halfway through the Q&A session, a young woman raised her hand. Her voice shook when she spoke. "I've been thinking about leaving the industry because I couldn't figure out how to be both a good engineer and a good mother. Hearing that your CTO manages both, that he leaves at 3:30 for his daughter, that you schedule around his family, it gives me hope." Marcus met Tori's eyes across the stage, saw everything they'd built reflected there, not just technical innovation, but proof that you didn't have to sacrifice everything to be valuable. "The work matters," his voice carried across the conference hall. "But the people in your life matter more. You don't have to choose between being good at your job and being present for your family. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying." The applause lasted longer than expected. Marcus's apartment had become their apartment without any formal declaration. Tori's belongings mixed with his, her expensive coffee maker next to his ancient toaster, her work clothes hanging in a closet that used to hold only flannel and jeans. They'd started looking at houses. Something bigger with a yard for the dog Maya desperately wanted, close to good schools and Harbor Line headquarters space for all of them to grow into. But first, a different kind of house. Saturday morning found them at Chicago Animal Rescue. Maya practically vibrating with excitement as a shelter volunteer walked them through the kennels. Dogs of every size and temperament, all of them hoping for someone to choose them. Maya stopped in front of a kennel holding a golden retriever puppy. The dog looked at her with liquid brown eyes and wagged its entire body. "This one," Can we get this one? Marcus and Tori exchanged a look. The kind of silent communication that came from months of learning each other's languages. You sure? Marcus asked his daughter. This is a big responsibility. I'm sure. Maya pressed her face against the kennel. She needs us. Tori smiled. Then I guess we're getting a dog. Can we name her Butterscotch? Marcus laughed, despite himself. Why butterscotch? Because she's the color of butterscotch candies. Duh. They brought Butterscotch home that afternoon, spent the evening setting up a dog bed and food bowls and trying to explain to a puppy that shoes were not toys. Maya was in heaven. The puppy was chaos incarnate. Tori documented everything with her phone while Marcus attempted damage control. It was perfect. Sunday evening, Marcus drove to Oak Hill Cemetery with Maya. Their monthly ritual of visiting Sarah's grave, bringing flowers, telling her about their lives. Tori waited in the truck, giving them space. This was their time, their connection to someone who'd shaped both of them and deserved to be remembered. Marcus stood at the headstone holding Maya's hand while his daughter talked about school and butterscotch, and how Tori had taught her to make pancakes that didn't burn. I told Mommy about Tori, Maya's voice was matter-of-fact, and about butterscotch. I think she's happy for us. Marcus looked down at his impossibly wise 8-year-old. I think so too. Do you still miss her? Every day. He pulled Maya close. But I'm learning that missing someone and being happy can exist at the same time. They're not opposites. Maya considered this. Like how I can love Mommy and love Tori. They're different but both real, exactly like that. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Maya squeezed his hand. I'm ready to go. Tori's probably getting cold. Back at the truck, Tori had the heat running. She smiled when they climbed in, Maya in back, Marcus in the passenger seat, for once letting Tori drive them home. Good visit. Yeah. Marcus reached over and took her hand. Really good. The house they found was in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from Harbor Line. 3 bedrooms, fenced yard, good school district. Room for Maya to grow up, for Butterscotch to run, for all of them to build something that looked like family. They moved in on a Saturday in October. Friends from Harbor Line showed up to help Diane directing traffic, like a military operation, Tyler carrying boxes twice his size to prove he could, Richard surprising everyone by appearing with coffee and donuts for the volunteers. By evening, the furniture was arranged and the boxes were mostly unpacked, and Maya was running through the house with Butterscotch, both of them discovering new spaces to explore. Tori found Marcus standing in the backyard staring at the sky. You okay? Yeah. He pulled her close. Just thinking about how different life looks than it did a year ago. Better different or worse different? Better. Definitely better. He kissed the top of her head. Though I never thought I'd own a house with someone who has more degrees than I do and makes me look bad at cooking. You make yourself look bad at cooking. I'm just present for the disasters. They stood together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Maya's laughter drifted from inside the house. Butterscotch barked at something only puppies could see. Marcus thought about the morning his life had changed. BMW broken down on I-90. 26 minutes to save a stranger's career. A sandwich that meant more than money. Everything had spiraled out from that moment. Professional resurrection. Falling in love. Learning that second chances were real if you had the courage to take them. Thank you. He said it quietly. For what? For stopping me from staying small. For seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself. He turned to face her. For not letting me hide. Tori smiled. You did the same for me. Reminded me that success without connection is just expensive loneliness. We're quite the pair. Yeah. She kissed him. We really are. 1 year after Tori's BMW died on I-90, Marcus picked her up before dawn. Drove to the exact spot where they'd met, pulled onto the shoulder where her perfect morning had fallen apart, and his life had started coming back together. The November air was cold, wind cutting through their jackets, déjà vu so strong it felt like time folding in on itself. "This is where we met." Marcus stated the obvious because he didn't know how else to start. "I know. I've thought about that morning so many times." He turned to face her, pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. "I talked to Maya first. She helped pick it out. Said it needed to be pretty but not too sparkly because you're practical." Tori started crying before he even opened the box. "I know people will say it's fast. 9 months officially together, a year since we met. But I also know I want every morning, even the terrible pancake mornings with you." He opened the bomb, simple diamond on a silver band, elegant and understated. "Every evening listening to Maya's stories with you. Every moment of this messy, beautiful life with you. Victoria Hayes, will you marry me?" She was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, God, yes. 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, kissed her while cars rushed past on I-90, none of them stopping because there was no emergency here. Just two people who'd saved each other building a future on the shoulder where they'd first met. Some coincidences weren't accidents. Some strangers changed everything. And sometimes the fastest way forward was letting someone see you. Really see you broken and brilliant and worthy of a second chance. Tori pulled back enough to look at him. "Can I tell you something? Anything." "That morning when my car died, I thought my whole world was ending. Missed presentation, failed career, everything I'd worked for disappearing." She touched his face. "But it was really the morning everything started. The morning I stopped building a life alone and started building one that mattered." "Same," Marcus smiled. "I was so focused on staying safe, on not risking anything, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to actually live." "What changed?" "You did. You saw someone on the side of a highway and decided they were worth saving." He kissed her again. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best." Tori held up her hand, the ring catching the early morning light. "This is the best." They drove away from the highway shoulder in Marcus's old blue truck, the same vehicle that had pulled over on a cold November morning to help a stranger. Maya was in the back seat with Butterscotch, both of them singing off-key to whatever was playing on the classic rock station. In the rearview mirror, Marcus could see his daughter laughing, could see Tori's hand resting on his arm, the engagement ring solid and real, could see the life they'd built from broken pieces and second chances and the courage to believe that people deserved to be whole. Sarah would have liked this, would have liked Tori, would have wanted him to be happy instead of haunted. He'd carry her memory forward not as weight but as foundation. The love that taught him what family meant, the loss that taught him what mattered, the grief that made him value every moment of joy when it finally came again. The truck merged onto I-90, heading toward their new house, toward pancakes that would probably burn, toward a future they were building together one imperfect morning at a time. Marcus reached over and took Tori's hand. She squeezed back, and they drove toward home.